Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
So Jon Stewart recently hosted two former secretaries of state on his podcast, one Hillary Rodham Clinton and Condoleezza Rice. It was an extraordinary conversation in a whole lot of ways because you had two leading representatives of the blob foreign policy consensus, one Democrat and one Republican, put on the spot to explain the U.S.'s disastrous foreign policy record of recent years. Now, if you listen to the entire thing, you will get to hear Condoleezza Rice defending our war in Iraq by claiming unbelievably that the U.S. government really thought there were weapons of mass destruction and that they just couldn't stand to leave a dictator like Saddam Hussein in power. Such great humanitarians in the Bush administration, you know. You will hear Hillary Clinton downplaying our actions in Libya to take out Gaddafi, portraying our role as simply supporting local actors, including the Arab League, shirking responsibility for the aftermath. You will also hear a consistent drumbeat from both of them, trying to deflect from the disastrous interventions which cost hundreds of thousands of lives and trillions of dollars and spread chaos and terror through an entire region. The propaganda, the lies, and the misdirections are really quite stunning. Now, in their telling, the U.S. is a good actor in the world, intervening for benevolent humanitarian reasons and should be held blameless for all of our many mistakes. These mistakes are treated by the two as little oopsies rather than the catastrophic, devastating failures that they actually were. Whole thing is worth a listen. But I thought I would share with you my favorite exchange in which Jon Stewart explains the military-industrial complex to Hillary Clinton. Take a listen.
Have the actions of America led to a more unstable and globalized situation that has inflamed populism in this country, inflamed it in Europe? And I'll explain what I mean. You talked earlier about the buckets, defense, development, and
diplomacy.
Mm-hmm. Our priorities as a country since World War II have really, all the conversations that you're talking about, but there's also this other sort of, as Eisenhower warned, military-industrial complex that kind of has a mind on its own. And I'll give you the example. State Department budget is what, $50 billion?
A little bit more.
A little bit more,
Right.
but around there. USAID,
Yeah.
not big enough. Lockheed Martin got 70-some billion dollars just by itself. And if you think about a budget as a set of priorities, if we're giving one defense contractor, we sell arms to over 100 countries. We sell arms to countries we sanction. There are conflicts in the world where both sides are using U.S. armaments, Turkey and the Syrian Kurds. Is our inability to control that aspect of our society sowing the seeds for the instability that we see around the world that's leading to this more populist, illiberal pendulum swing? And how do we rein that in?
Some great points there about the military-industrial complex and a great question. Have the actions of America actually created more instability? I mean, it's actually a pretty simple question, but what he's really asking is, with all your concern about democracy, are you, Hillary Clinton, and your ideological ilk, are you the real threat to democracy? Let's hear how she responds.
I understand the question, and
Yeah.
I do think it's worth exploring, and I'll get to that in a minute, but
Sure.
I think it is historically inaccurate to say that our defense budget or our arms sale has promoted the authoritarian impulses in Viktor Orban, who was a NATO ally,
Right.
to Vladimir Putin, to Xi Jinping. I don't see the correlation there.
She doesn't see the correlation there. Behold the propaganda at work. First, Hillary chooses just three examples, Orban, Xi, and Putin, as if they comprise the entire world. Then she claims we obviously have nothing to do with the rise of these autocrats in these three countries, even though just with this tiny subset of nations, her analysis is already preposterous. Just consider Putin and Russia as one example, where first of all, we were instrumental in triggering the downfall of the Soviet Union. We were center stage in constructing their post-Soviet system of oligarchy and imposing economic shock doctrine so that our capitalists could exploit the profit opportunity. And we pursued policies like NATO expansion after the end of the Cold War, which predictably led to that nation feeling they were under threat from the West. Let me give my standard disclaimer. None of this is a justification for their invasion of Ukraine. But To pretend like we had absolutely nothing to do with the current domestic political situation in Russia is, to borrow a phrase from HRC herself, historically inaccurate. But there's more, because Jon Stewart is not ready to let her off the hook just yet.
Let me draw it then maybe a little bit more specifically. And this is all, and again, this is not to relitigate, honestly. What happened in Libya, we take out an authoritarian leader through a military action, but we don't have the civic institutions that you talk about to back that up, and it creates instability. Or what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's a chaos that is born of that, right? Suddenly you have 35 million displaced individuals who migrate towards Europe. Europe feels the heat of what they consider this other that's coming to their borders. It creates the impetus for more populist, more illiberal, more authoritarian impulses to then gain traction democratically. Those are direct results of American military intervention.
So Stewart's argument here, pretty clear. These wars and interventions triggered humanitarian disasters and floods of refugees, which were not only catastrophic, obviously, for those countries and those human beings, but also helped to create political instability around the world, and that this instability resulted in the rise of far-right anti-democratic parties. Here, Jon Stewart is actually offering up an explanation that Hillary Clinton herself agrees with. We know this because she has, in a different context, made almost exactly the same argument, just without connecting the refugees' flows directly to U.S. actions. Here, for example, is HRC in 2018 arguing that refugees are fueling illiberal right-wing parties and suggesting that European leaders crack down on migrant flows in an attempt to maintain neoliberal political power. She told The Guardian, quote, "I admire the very generous and compassionate approaches that were taken particularly by leaders like Angela Merkel, but I think it is fair to say Europe has done its part and must send a very clear message. We are not going to be able to continue to provide refugees and support because if we don't deal with the migration issue, it will continue to roil the body politic." So he's got her checkmated here based on her own statements. Our policy, driven by the military-industrial complex, caused refugees fed political instability and illiberalism. So will she admit maybe he's got a point? Of course not.
It's very hard to lump even the examples you just put together into sort of one bucket and say that then caused dislocation. That dislocation meant refugees to the shores of Europe, and that, because remember, Angela Merkel took 1 million Syrian refugees. The United States had nothing to do with Bashar al-Assad joining forces with Russia and Iran to suppress legitimate dissent. She took 1 million refugees,
Right.
and Germany did not turn into Hungary.
But Germany feels that pressure, and you see those right-wing parties start
not
to...
really.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's minor league compared to what
Certainly
could have
compared to
happened.
Hungary. Yeah, well, compared to that.
And
Because of strong institutions. of
Orban
Germany.
didn't take any refugees. I mean, he built the walls, kept them out. He didn't take any refugees. He used the issue not to solve a problem, but to consolidate power for himself.
Right.
And so I think that there are lessons always to be learned from any of these situations. And woe on us if we don't learn the lesson.
Woe on us if we don't learn the lessons, but apparently, per HRC, there are no lessons to learn, at least not for her. Ultimately, her response here boils down to, well, it's complicated, so let's just pretend our policies had absolutely nothing to do with it. Now, both of these women were part of catastrophic foreign policy mistakes. Neither one appears to have learned a single thing. And more importantly, their ideology still dominates Washington. It's the ideology that lamented our withdrawal from Afghanistan as a tragedy for women, but remained silent as we starved them of their own money. The ideology that ignored our complicity in genocide in Yemen because it was being done by our buddies, the Saudis. The ideology that is pushing for full regime change in Russia and goes into complete meltdown if you even suggest the mere possibility of diplomacy to try to end the Ukraine war. Listen carefully to their words, because they may not have their positions of authority anymore, but their disastrous views still hold a lot of power. Saagar, the level of dissembling here Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.